The Houston Texans have fired offensive coordinator Bobby Slowik after 2 seasons with the team. Slowik has been shown the door by head coach DeMeco Ryans. A successful first year, a disappointing second year, and the head coach of the Houston Texans has decided to make a change, move on from the offensive coordinator, and start a search to help improve this Houston Texans offense, which held back the team in the 2024 season. We've got so much to get into on the firing of Bobby Slowik. I've been on this for weeks now that they've got to make a change. They've got to consider making a change. I've got a list of 30-ish names that the Texans could chase from an offensive coordinator standpoint that we'll go over. But the biggest thing ringing out of this for the Houston Texans is DeMeco Ryans made a very difficult decision, but a correct decision. Ryans came into the San Francisco staff around the same time as Bobby Slowik. They moved up through the ranks in San Francisco, and he was friendly with Bobby Slowik. Unfortunately, the job that Bobby Slowik did in 2024, it cost the Texans dearly. The offense was not good. And yes, there were players and issues within the offense that were out of Bobby Slowik's control. He can't make Shaq Mason a better blocker. He can't make Stefon Diggs' knee work for the entire season. He can't prevent Tank Dell from getting injured. But the stuff that Bobby Slowik was in control of was not good enough for the organization, and they have decided to move on from Bobby Slowik, and this is the correct move. DeMeco Ryans, he is fantastic at coordinating the defense, but the offense let the team down. That was the story of 2024. Coming into the season, what's this offense going to look like in the second year of CJ Stroud? How will he evolve and grow as a player? He didn't seem to evolve and grow in 2024. They added all these weapons, Stefon Diggs and Joe Mixon. They had the offensive line that they wanted from the end of the 2023 draft on the field, and the offense never clicked. It never looked good. It never looked like it was going to be the offense that this team needed to have to go to where they've never been before, which is the AFC Championship and potentially the Super Bowl. It didn't look good enough throughout the course of the season, and again, the things Slowik was in control of didn't look good. The game plan was often archaic. I say archaic in that it was similar to last year, so defenses were ready for it. He was not timely with how he called some of his plays. Some of the operation of the offense, which he's in control of, looked like an issue. And this is something that the Texans had to do to get to where they want to go. Eventually, they're going to make a change at offensive coordinator, firing Bobby Slowik. So lots of stuff to get to on this. We'll get to your comments and questions. Super chats go to the front of the line. A little bit later on, I'll open up the lines. You can jump on if you'd like. And then, of course, over at Houston Football, for subscribers at Houston Football, I've got the big list of 30-plus names for the potential offensive coordinator job. 30-plus names over at Houston Football. Subscribers get full access to it over the course of the article, and we'll talk about some of those names. Jamal, for the super chat, great day for a first super chat. Sorry it came so late, LOL. Jamal, appreciate you for jumping in and appreciate you for the super chat. Look, late was something that the Texans could have been if they ultimately didn't make this move today. I just wrote about this for Houston Football this morning. Waiting around to fire Bobby Slowik was going to hurt the Houston Texans. They ultimately make the move. DeMeco Ryans said he would take the week to make the decision, but the Lions offensive coordinator job is open and has been open for a few days now. The Buccaneers offensive coordinator job is open and has been open since, last night. And those are two really good offensive coordinator jobs. The Seattle Seahawks job's open. The San Francisco 49ers OC job is open. You needed to get in the pool. You needed to get in the pool and start getting into the list of candidates that you want to interview for this offensive coordinator job. So waiting did not benefit the Houston Texans, and they're probably already behind the ball when it comes to Detroit. And you need to keep pace with Tampa Bay. Remember, Detroit's offensive coordinator spot, it just created a head coach. Tampa Bay's offensive coordinator spot, back-to-back years, it's created a head coach. You have to go out there, get these guys in the building, get these guys talking to DeMeco Ryans, sell them on the opportunity that CJ Stroud, Joe Mixon, Nico Collins, what they're going to add to the offense is all going to be something that is exciting and worth coordinating if you are one of the top offensive minds in the NFL and you want to make that move to the OC job. Look, this is one of the better offensive coordinator spots available to you in the NFL. Obviously, Detroit's really good and Tampa's good. You start looking around at who's a defensive-minded head coach or who's the head coach that doesn't call offensive plays, and you have the ability to be the top offensive mind in Houston if you take this offensive coordinator job. You've got a young quarterback that hasn't developed bad habits that can't get coached out of him. Like CJ Stroud dipped a little bit in production from last year to this year. It's not like CJ Stroud's broken and unfixable. That might be the case in Jacksonville. That's not the case in Houston. So you don't have to coach out a bunch of bad things. There are some pieces of talent that are put together. They have an elite wide receiver. They have a very good running back. The left tackle is in place. You've got to fix some of the offensive line. We may find out just how important coaching was to that offensive line's performance over the course of the season, or of the course of next season, but you got to add some pieces here and there. Got to get a little bit deeper at wide receiver, back up for Joe Mixon. Oh, by the way, this defense gives you a chance to be in every game. So when you're coordinating this offense, your job's a little easier because the defense should help you with turnovers, help you with field position, keep the other team from putting points on the board. Like, it's a really attractive job. It's a really interesting job. And I'll be excited to see who all the Texans will be chasing for an offensive coordinator standpoint. Jamal, appreciate you for the super chat. Young Costa, hashtag Slowik for Jacksonville. They got their guy. They got Liam Cohen. So, I mean, they don't need Bobby Slowik. Maybe he goes and helps Cohen on the offensive staff, but Jacksonville's got their guy. They don't need Bobby Slowik. Kingdom Bear. Wow, Kidero, Cody, amazing. Just yesterday said that was easier for the Texans. Let Slowik go, even though we know that he has to go. Look, I don't believe this was an easy decision for DeMeco Ryans because you could convince yourself that the first year wasn't a fluke and Slowik could recapture some of those things. You put some good offensive minds around him and maybe, just maybe, Bobby Slowik bounces back. But that's a bigger risk than trying something new. And DeMeco Ryans decided to move on from his friend, move on from the only offensive coordinator he's had in his 2 years as a head coach. And he's going to go out there, and I hope he casts a very, very wide net. We'll get into some names here in just a moment. Kingdom Bear, appreciate you for the super chat. Jason, who's your top three for the OC spot? So we'll get into the names here in just a moment. Jason, I appreciate you for the super chat. I want to hit a couple of comments here, a couple of questions, and then we can go into my top three names, some of the other names outside of that as well. Let me make sure that the old bat phone isn't going too crazy, and we can get after it. And of course, if you see anything new or updated, or you see a list of potential candidates that jumps up on the Twitter sphere, send it in the chat. We'll get to it. We'll talk about it. But Bobby Slowik, if you're just tuning in, he's no longer the offensive coordinator of the Houston Texans. The Texans took some steps back in some really important places as a team. I know there was some moments where they were the top passing offense. I know there were some moments where they were, a pretty good yardage offense, but they couldn't score points. They were bad in the red zone. They were bad on third downs. They were bad in key moments. Execution was not there for this Texans team. So let's get into my names. Let's get into my top name, my name that sits above everybody else when it comes to potential offensive coordinators. And that name is a guy who coaches for the Los Angeles Rams. He is the tight ends coach and the pass game coordinator, and his name is Nick Caley. Now, if you recognize the name Nick Caley, you should recognize his name. He was the third person that the Houston Texans interviewed for their offensive coordinator position before they settled on Bobby Slowik after interviewing Cliff Kingsbury. So they interviewed 3 guys. They interviewed Nick Caley, they interviewed Bobby Slowik, and they interviewed Cliff Kingsbury. They landed on Bobby Slowik. Nick Caley, previously the tight ends coach for the New England Patriots, so a little experience with how New England runs their offense, primarily when Josh McDaniels was there. So a little experience with how they run their offense and that New England style of offense. Caley was the tight ends coach for the Patriots, and then he left New England and became a member of Sean McVay's coaching staff with the Los Angeles Rams. With the Rams, Caley had a pretty successful first season, and then the New England Patriots came calling and wanted him to be the offensive coordinator last season. The Patriots reportedly, according to Albert Breer, offered him up to $3 million to be the offensive coordinator for the quarterback that they were going to draft, and for Drake, ultimately ended up being Drake May, and for Gerard Mayo. Caley turned down the opportunity to be the offensive coordinator of the New England Patriots. He stuck around with Sean McVay for one more year, and that is one of the main reasons I like him as a candidate. Is he wanted a little bit more of the Sean McVay seasoning. You look at some of the names across the league that coached under Sean McVay that are now head coaches. You think about Zach Taylor and the success that he has had in Cincinnati. You think about Kevin O'Connell and the success that he has had basically immediately in Minnesota. Those guys didn't call plays under Sean McVay. Obviously, McVay's got the headset. Caley didn't call plays at any of his stops as a piece of a coaching staff on offense. So that is a little bit of a ding against him, but ultimately Caley is my top guy. And some of the more nerdy and in the know football minds, like the Athletic Football Show, started anointing him as the next Ben Johnson. How would you like to have the next Ben Johnson as your offensive coordinator? Sounds pretty good to me. So Nick Caley, the Los Angeles Rams tight ends coach / pass game coordinator, he's my top choice. Here's the thing. Caley is in consideration for the Jets job. He may interview for that. I would also tell you that Caley is probably in consideration for some of these other vacant offensive coordinator jobs, because when you look at Tampa and the king-making that they've done in Tampa the past 2 seasons, hey, if I can go be the Buccaneers head or offensive coordinator for 1 year and then go be a head coach like Dave Canales or like Liam Cohen, maybe I am excited about that opportunity. So Caley should be in high demand. His relationship that I assume he has with Nick Caserio from them both being in New England, the fact that DeMeco Ryans previously talked to him, and then at the conclusion of that conversation, Caley went to football camp with Sean McVay for 2 years. He's my top choice amongst the potential offensive coordinator candidates. Let's get to some of these super chats. Let's get to these comments as well. We'll see what you folks think about Nick Caley. Dime says, the era of good vibes continues. Trust in DeMeco Ryans and Nick. Dime, you're absolutely right about that. We may need to reprint the stickers. The era of good vibes. That's what I deemed the Texans entering when DeMeco Ryans was hired. Obviously, it continued with the success of C.J. Stroud, Will Anderson in the first season. Successful-ish second season, but ultimately a tough decision to make. You put faith in DeMeco Ryans. He pays off that faith for you. Dime, appreciate the super chat. Dom from Jersey, this is a huge message sent by DeMeco. We are no longer accepting mediocrity. I want to join live. We will open the lines here in just a little while. Dom, stick around, stay tuned. We'll have that open for you. Jacob, we learned a lot about DeMeco Ryans today. Dude has high standards. He absolutely does. Look, they could have kept Bobby Slowik, changed the coaching staff around him, and that would have been a reasonable conversation or explanation for what exactly they wanted to do with the offense in 2025. I wouldn't have liked it, but that would have been reasonable. Certainly, DeMeco Ryans not happy with what the offense did, and it would have been difficult for Bobby Slowik to justify the job that he did and save his job. Jacob, appreciate you for the super chat. Turo, summarize Slowik's year in 2024 in 2 to 3 words. Uninventive, predictable, disappointing. I had high hopes for Bobby Slowik. Remember, a year ago, The entire Texans sphere was excited that Bobby Slowik stayed, wasn't getting a head coach opportunity, wasn't going to go leave the organization after 1 year of success. We were all excited that Bobby Slowik and Gerard Johnson were sticking around, and the perpetrators of that incredible offense, along with an upgraded offensive unit, were going to be back in 2024. Like, that was an exciting thing. And then it was very disappointing in 2024. That's probably the main word that I'd put, but uninventive and predictable, adding to Bobby Slowik's tenure as the offensive coordinator in 2024. And ultimately, he gets shown the door. Zach Rose in all caps, Stoots the GOAT. So looking forward to the offseason now and who they bring in. Thanks for the updates and all the hard work, bro. Go Texans. Appreciate you, Zach. Appreciate the super chat. Look, this could be a really short process if they get their guy. This could be a process that carries on for a few days. I have to imagine that the few days that it took to fire Bobby Slowik required a little bit of backroom channeling to figure out exactly who they could get, what they could get from an offensive coordinator standpoint. Would some of these names be interesting? So I have to imagine that was part of the weight behind Bobby Slowik. Lucid Illusions, D'Amico making this move and getting rid of the O-line coach as well tells me they're serious at getting better at their biggest weakness. Absolutely. Absolutely. They could have been serious by keeping Slowik, though the level of seriousness would not have reached ultimately where it went today when they fired Bobby Slowik. They could have made some changes on the staff. Now the potential for a whole offensive staff overhaul is there. New O-line coach, new quarterback coach, new tight ends coach, new wide receivers coach, new pass game coordinator, new run game coordinator. All those things are potentially true with a new staff. And if I was currently on the staff, I'd either be brushing up my resume or I'd be making my initial plea to the head coach of the organization. Hey, let me stick around. I can do this. I can do this. I can make this work. And let me pitch to the next guy to see if I can keep my job when the new guy comes in. So Lucid Illusions, appreciate you for the super chat. Shane Omen, the worst this offseason grade could be is a B- after parting ways from Bobby Slowik and Chris Strausser. Yeah, let's see what kind of players they do. Ultimately, the players are going to decide this thing. If they had just 5 badass offensive linemen, maybe Bobby's still the offensive coordinator, but getting the most out of the players that you do have, some of the players that you are stuck with, that you can't move on from, that's going to be one of the key challenges and charges to that new offensive coordinator is figure out what you can do with the guys that we absolutely are going to have here, and then maybe we're kind of stuck with from an offensive standpoint. When I think about stuck, I think about they're stuck with one contract between Shaq Mason or Titus Howard. They're stuck with Dalton Schultz. They're stuck with, maybe not a lot of avenues to improve the depth at wide receiver. So how can you maximize those players would be one of the big questions I'd have for D'Amico Ryans. Smokey 254 McKenzie, which sounds like a John Gruden play. Cody, seems like Texans fans are spit about a first-round pick, but I think O-line, you want wide receiver. What do you think? Got to get weapons. Got to get weapons. Got to get guys in here and catch the football from C.J. Stroud, spend free agency money, spend time adding veterans to help the offensive line. I'm tired of young guys on this offensive line. Tired of young guys getting the opportunity. Kevin says, Cody, thoughts on the Shanahan system nowadays? It does feel like the NFL has caught up to it a bit. The McVay style of it has passed the Kyle Shanahan tree, though there are going to be coaches, I would think, that are interested in this job that can pitch and can say, hey, we're going to not change too much from this system. I'll put my own spin on it. That's kind of what Bobby Slowik was supposed to do, and ultimately it didn't work. But the Shanahan system, it's a little bit lower these days than what McVay has been putting together. And Shanahan has not sent out very much from a coaching tree standpoint, not certainly like McVay has. Getting a couple things about the offensive line coach situation. Want to get a report on there. So let's see. Offense. You knew all Chris Strausser was getting fired. And if they moved on from the other O-line coach, so be it. BG, 700 plus subscribers. I hope they're all subscribers. 700 plus viewers. Hit the like button. Certainly would appreciate that. BG, appreciate your support. Thank you for the super chat. Brett says, both O-line coaches gone too, thankfully. Okay, there's Brett saying both O-line coaches, Cole Popovich, Chris Strausser, they're out. The offensive line was terrible this season. And I know the players had disappointing performances. The coaches did not make it any better. The coaches did not help this situation for the Houston Texans. Thank you, Brett, for that. Don Burr says, please don't call Hank Fraley. This is from a Detroit fan. So Hank Fraley is a fascinating candidate. I actually added him to my offensive coordinator list last night. And Hank Fraley is an intriguing guy. He was a former offensive lineman at Robert Morris. He was an undrafted guy who ended up with about a decade of experience in the NFL playing offensive line. He's been an O-line coach in Detroit for a few years. Got the big promotion to actual O-line coach. He interviewed for the offensive coordinator position for the Seattle Seahawks. The Seahawks have a defensive-minded head coach, Mike McDonald. So Hank Fraley, despite not having a ton of call plays, build things experience, Hank Fraley is an intriguing candidate, mainly because you would think with the success that the Detroit Lions had on their offensive line, Hank Fraley is an intriguing candidate to teams that had poor offensive line play in 2024. So the Texans had poor offensive line play in 2024. Hank Fraley, old school guy, played the position, probably a little bit of a hard ass, and comes in here, whips the O-line into shape, gives you a little bit more modernized offense or more forward-thinking offense, or steals from Ben Johnson a little bit. Obviously, he coached under Johnson, as Johnson was the previous offensive coordinator in Detroit. So Fraley's an intriguing candidate, not near the top of my list, but he's an interesting guy. Tom Bastic 475, how about a new strength and conditioning team? You look at everything. When you have a disappointing season, you look at everything. Even the successful side of the ball, they got to get assessed. You got to figure out if everything on the defense went the way that it needs to. I do tend to think that I like their strength and conditioning team a lot, and it seems like the players like them, so I don't know if they're as close to this. But, you look at everything when something like this happens. Serenity with a super chat. How do you feel Doug Peterson as offensive coordinator if he doesn't get a head coaching position? I'm a little lukewarm on Doug Peterson. I don't love the idea. Obviously, a tremendous amount of experience and a really good resume, but it didn't look good in Jacksonville. For 2 years, we've been talking about how Jacksonville hasn't looked very good on offense. This past year, he even gave up play calling duties. So I don't know that Doug Peterson is as fun and exciting as he was when, ultimately Jacksonville hired him, or when he had that success in Philadelphia. You can do a lot worse than Doug Peterson. You can certainly do much better than Doug Peterson. Serenity, thank you for the super chat. Marky Mark, if we get Nick Caley, what are the chances of us getting Cooper Kupp? It's not out of the equation. I mean, Caley, if they bring him over, again, Nick Caley is the tight ends coach and pass game coordinator for the Los Angeles Rams. If they bring Nick Caley over as the offensive coordinator, he'll obviously have an understanding of what the situation is with the Rams offense. Cooper Kupp, probably not long for the Rams. So if he's a free agent, Caley might have interest in him. If they want to trade for him to keep him from hitting free agency, Caley could have interest in him. Denard Robinson, a wide receiver on that team, he's a free agent. So perhaps Denard Robinson, when he hits free agency, is a guy that can come in. He knows roughly what the offense would look like, I would think, and he finds himself with an opportunity to help kind of, hey, this is what Coach Caley likes. He kind of spreads that out to the rest of the offense. But I would be interested in a cheaper version of Cooper Kupp. Like if the contract gets adjusted or he gets cut and they bring him in, I'd be interested in that if I was the Houston Texans. Dame with a super chat. I'm honestly glad to get out of the Shanahan system. Never thought we had the right personnel, especially with blocking tight ends and receivers. If they want to depart from the Shanahan system, they want to get away from the Shanahan system and run something else, run a offshoot like the Sean McVay system, I'm fine with that. If they feel like they have to have a Shanahan-style guy, not only do they need to get somebody who's a bit more inventive and has showcased some success running it elsewhere outside of San Francisco, they've got to go get those type of players that can ultimately find themselves They got to go out and get those type of players that can find themselves fitting into the Shanahan style of offense as well. So, if you get out of the Shanahan system, I'm fine with it. I prefer the McVay system. So, someone from McVay's staff, I'll get you a couple more names here in a moment. Lucid Illusions 499 Lucid Illusions with a super chat. Aaron Wilson reporting the internal hires for OC expected to be considered for the job: Gerard Johnson, Bill Lazor, and Ben McDaniels. If they promote from within, I don't believe that's going to be an acceptable operation for most. I mean, Gerard Johnson has been coaching a handful of years. They didn't trust him to fire Bobby in the middle of the year and hand the thing to him. Why would they do that? Same thing I would say about Bill Lazor. He's been an offensive coordinator a couple of times in the NFL, both times not great. And Ben McDaniels is the wide receiver coach who's been on the staff for a few years now. Ben McDaniels called plays in a training camp practice in Cleveland. So Bobby Slowik on the final day in Cleveland did not call plays. Ben McDaniels had the headset and called plays for the Texans that day in the final day of training camp practice in Cleveland. I always thought that was an interesting little nugget for the season, that maybe they thought highly of Ben Daniels more highly of Ben Daniels versus Gerard Johnson. Obviously, Gerard Johnson's getting offensive coordinator buzz from last season. And then this season, he's rumored to be on the short list for the Jets. So talk to him, maybe talk to him about, hey, how do you fit in on a new staff? I would not be excited with any three of these hires being promotions to take over the offensive coordinator spot. And my big question would be, why the hell didn't you do it in the middle of the season? Okay. Lucid Illusions, thank you. Uriel Garza, Eric Bieniemy. Eric Bieniemy is not even on my top 50. Eric Bieniemy has had really bad success or really poor performances since he left Kansas City. And in Kansas City, a lot of that was Andy Reid. It was Mike Kafka. It was some other coaches. And Kansas City would tell you that. And Andy Reid's told you that over the years. Bieniemy left the Chiefs, and the Commanders were the 25th scoring offense in the NFL in 2023. Now they're playing for the NFC Championship. They got a better quarterback situation, but there's clearly something left on the table, and the coach got fired. Eric Bieniemy also went to college this past season. He was the offensive coordinator at UCLA, and he coordinated the 126th scoring offense in college. So Eric Bieniemy is not on my list. I would not hire Eric Bieniemy to be the offensive coordinator of the Houston Texans. So let's talk about one of the exciting names that people want to talk about and like to talk about, and that is Ohio State offensive coordinator Chip Kelly. So Chip Kelly certainly was on my list of potential candidates. He's not one of my favorites, and I feel like he's not one of my favorites for a very particular reason. Chip Kelly leaving Ohio State for the Houston Texans job, I just don't see that jump happening. Obviously, Chip Kelly is familiar with DeMeco Ryans, having coached him in Philadelphia. There's a great story that Chip Kelly used to call DeMeco Ryans Mufasa, a.k.a. the Lion King, because DeMeco just kind of ran things in Philadelphia. And yes, you should check in just to see if some of your top candidates turn you down or you don't get some of the top guys. You should check in and see what Chip Kelly's interest level is. I don't believe Chip Kelly's going to leave a juggernaut at the college level. The deck is stacked in Ohio State's favor every year. There's about 12 teams in college football where every year you start the year with an inherent advantage that other teams don't. Ohio State is one of them. They get the best players. They're always going to get the best players. And another aspect of college that we don't think about with college coordinators, if you don't like the quarterback or the quarterback performs poorly, you can swap them out year over year over year. In the NFL, you're pot committed. So do I want to coach CJ Stroud for the next few years? Yeah, it's an intriguing opportunity, but I'm always going to be the offensive coordinator. It's a lot of work. It's a 24/7 job being the OC when the head coach is a defensive-minded guy. You oversee everything when it comes to the offense. Nobody's helping you. You're the top offensive mind. Ryan Day helps out with the offense with Chip Kelly. That's a former play caller. It's a former offensive mind. So he helps out you. The job's easier. It's easier to be more successful. And I know people speak about redemption. Okay. When you speak about redemption with Chip Kelly, oh, what if he wants to come back to the league and get redemption? There's no redemption for Chip Kelly. Chip Kelly failed as a head coach. Nobody felt like he was a bad offensive mind. He failed as a head coach. Nobody's making him a head coach again. And if he wants to be a head coach, he can get that job from the offensive coordinator spot at Ohio State. So Chip Kelly, to me, not a candidate because I don't believe Chip Kelly would leave. If you don't get somebody that you really want, I certainly understand trying to pry Chip Kelly away. So no Chip Kelly for me. Daryl says Chip Kelly or Byron Leftwich. Byron Leftwich didn't even coach in football last year. He was out of the league last year. Byron Leftwich went from head coach interviews to out of the league and not getting a job. So I don't know where Byron Leftwich comes from. I'd rather guys get the opportunity who are currently in the league. Now, don't get me wrong. Chip Kelly was awesome at Ohio State for most of the year. But remember when all of us were sitting there watching Michigan and Ohio State, we were sitting there screaming, Chip, you've got one of the best freshman wide receivers ever. Why can't you throw him the football? Why didn't you throw him the football? There's stuff to not like about Chip Kelly. Players in Philadelphia didn't always love him, though some players did like him. The offense, is it going to be the same offense that he ran last time in the NFL? Has he updated it? How did you adjust it? Man, there's a couple of different questions I'd have for Chip Kelly that keep him from being a super exciting name for the Houston Texans. And again, I don't believe Chip Kelly would leave for this job. Let's go to Los Angeles again for another name for you. And this name, again, should look familiar to you. And this name is Dave Ragone, Los Angeles Rams quarterback coach. Now, you're saying to yourself, why does Dave Ragone sound familiar to me, Cody? Dave Ragone was a former draft pick at quarterback for the Houston Texans. And Ragone has played a little quarterback and then went into coaching and has bounced around to a bunch of different places. So Dave Ragone ended up with his first opportunity at coaching with, you guessed it, Sean McVay. So he coached for Sean McVay when McVay was in Washington. After his stop in Washington with McVay, Ragone was in Chicago. And he was in Chicago and working on the Chicago staff. They fired John Fox, the only offensive coach that Matt Nagy kept when he came in was Dave Ragone. So you've worked under McVay. Now you've worked under Matt Nagy, which is the Andy Reid system. Okay. Then he leaves Chicago and goes to Atlanta, where he was the offensive coordinator under Arthur Smith. So now you've worked in 3 different systems. Now you've worked in the Sean McVay system. Now you've worked in the Andy Reid shoot-off under Matt Nagy. And now you've worked in that zone rushing scheme, which D'Amico Ryans speaks very highly of what Arthur Smith was able to accomplish. And Texans fans, you remember the 2023 Atlanta Falcons game where they cobbled together enough offense to beat the Texans in that matchup. So now he works under 3 different styles of offense. And then he goes to the Rams again as a quarterback's coach. And Sean McVay is really good friends with Dave Ragone. And he's talked about at length how impressive Dave Ragone is and how important of an offensive mind he is. And so Ragone is a guy that is certainly on my list. He's got experience in multiple systems with multiple coaches. And obviously double McVay connection for him, once in Washington, once here in LA, and McVay going to bat for you. Like, it's one thing to say, hey, yeah, this guy worked for McVay. McVay openly praising one of his friends and one of the guys, that's a positive for me, because I don't feel like Sean McVay just wildly throws out praise on his guys. So Dave Ragone, Los Angeles Rams quarterback coach, is certainly on my list. There's another quarterback's coach that the Houston Texans will be familiar with. There's another quarterback's coach that you will recognize the name. We'll get the familiar names out of the way first. You guys remember the name Josh McCown when he was almost the head coach of the Houston Texans twice over? Yeah, Josh McCown was almost this team's head coach twice. I have to assume he would have called the plays should he gotten that job. Ultimately, McCown stuck around in high school for another year. He ended up on the Carolina Panthers coaching staff with Frank Reich. And then he got fired when Frank Reich got fired in the middle of the season. Well, McCown wasn't done. He was on Kevin O'Connell's staff this past season. O'Connell brought Josh McCown in to be his quarterback's coach. It's worth noting McConnell had a reclamation project and a rookie that he needed McCown to coach up. So he trusted Josh McCown to coach up a reclamation project in Sam Darnold and a rookie in J.J. McCarthy. Obviously, McCarthy gets hurt. He's not available. They coach up Sam Darnold, O'Connell, McCown, and company, and they find themselves with a pretty decent season out of their quarterback. It kind of fell apart there at the end. Obviously, Nick Caserio is familiar with him, having interviewed him to be the head coach a couple of different times. DeMeco Ryans' familiarity with him, putting the connections to it, I'm not totally sure. I'd have to go back and look, see if maybe they played against each other a couple of times. But McCown's experience, long experience as backup quarterback, and even when he was a player, they let him call plays in Philly one time. McCown is an intriguing name. He's not my favorite. I like Ragone much more. I like Nick Caley much more. If you can get Chip Kelly, which I don't believe you can, I like Chip Kelly much more. But he's an intriguing name. There's some upward mobility and some potential to Josh McCown for the Houston Texans offensive coordinator position. So I would say there's some potential to him. Again, we're talking about the familiar names, the names that you might recognize. I think you'll recognize this name as well. Mainly the last name. You may not recognize the first name. How about Klint Kubiak, New Orleans Saints offensive coordinator? I should say former New Orleans Saints offensive coordinator. Klint Kubiak is a guy that has had a pretty good amount of success as an offensive coordinator. You think back to the time that he was in Minnesota and he called the plays in Minnesota with the Vikings when he was the offense coordinator in 2021. It was a pretty decent season. He then spent time as a pass game coordinator and quarterbacks coach for the Denver Broncos, the San Francisco 49ers. Last year, he was their passing game coordinator, and then he was the coach for the Saints this past year that called the plays in the building. Now, it looked awesome through 2 weeks. It came tumbling down because the Saints don't have any talent on that roster. But you think about the name, you think about the lineage, having been on the Denver Broncos staff, 2016, 2017, 2018, works his way up in Minnesota, takes over as the offensive coordinator. It was a pretty good season from Minnesota overall from an offensive coordinator standpoint when he called the plays. Then in Denver and San Francisco getting a little seasoning, and now most recently the offense coordinator for the Saints. Again, if you look at the Saints element of it, it doesn't look as good. It doesn't look as good when you look at the Saints element of it. But the potential, because he knows the system, he's familiar with that Shanahan style, having coached under his father, coached with his father, and obviously the last name is intriguing. Familiarity is a positive around Houston. I'm not going to say it's the reason DeMeco Ryans got the job, but it's not a bad thing. And if you get the sign off from the San Francisco crew and you go out on your own and you have some of your own results outside of San Francisco, maybe, just maybe, that's a little bit more attractive than some of these other names that you'll pop up. But Klint Kubiak, New Orleans Saints offensive coordinator, is a name that you should think about and keep in the back of your mind. Brett asked, when can we see a way too early Stoots mock draft? Next week, probably next Friday. When I get back from the Senior Bowl next week, you can get a way too early Stoots mock draft from me, Brett. Appreciate you for the super chat. All right, so Klint Kubiak as the name to just kind of think about, roll around in the back of your mind. Engineer throws out John Gruden. I don't believe Gruden wants to be an offensive coordinator. He had the chance to be the Saints OC last year. He ultimately did not. He ultimately did not take that job. He ultimately did not go about pursuing the offensive coordinator position for the New Orleans Saints. So with that, I would tell you that Gruden probably not going to be in the conversation there for the offensive coordinator spot for the Texans. Gage brings up an interesting name. It's not my favorite name, but it's on the list, and I think it's a useful one. T. Martin. T. Martin is currently the quarterback's coach for the Baltimore Ravens. Let me go ahead and put T. Martin on the screen so everybody can see him. So T. Martin is what we're looking for here. T. Martin. Make sure I spell it all right. I know it's hard. Baltimore QB coach. T. Martin is a national championship winning quarterback with the Tennessee Volunteers. He won when Peyton Manning left, and then he won the national championship. T. Martin then went and started a coaching career after a little playing career where he bounced around a little bit, played in NFL Europe, played in the CFL, but then he got into coaching. He's been coaching since 2006. So about 20 years of coaching from T. Martin. T. Martin was formerly the offensive coordinator at USC. He called the plays at USC despite having an offensive-minded head coach when he was there. Spent some time at Tennessee and then was the Baltimore Ravens wide receivers coach. And you're like, Cody, that's not that great. Well, when they hired Todd Monken in Baltimore to take over as the offensive coordinator, T. Martin moved from wide receivers coach to quarterback coach. So he's helping Todd Monken install the offense for Lamar Jackson. What did Lamar Jackson do with T. Martin as his quarterback's coach? Well, he just went out there and won back-to-back MVPs. So while T. Martin is not my most intriguing candidate, he's certainly on my short list. I'd put him below McCown. I would put him below Nick Caley. I'd put him below Dave Ragone. I don't believe Chip Kelly's an option, so he's not in the conversation. But T. Martin would check in at 4 in my top 4, with Caley, Ragone, and McCown being my 1, 2, 3. I like T. Martin. I like the potential of him. And having had success in college when an offensive-minded head coach trusted you to call the plays, I really like that from T. Martin. So T. Martin, the Baltimore Ravens quarterback's coach, a name to think about. Maxwell Gray says, breaking Texans planning to hire David Culley as OCE. Now, is that OC emeritus? Or just a mistype, Maxwell? Very funny. Very funny. Oh, my good friend Brad Kellner. BK weighing in. Please take Brian Schottenheimer from the Cowboys. I hear that he's incredible. I got to imagine Brian Schottenheimer does not want to take over a offensive coordinator job when a head coach job is on the table. Can't imagine that is something that he wants to do. Everybody in here, we got almost 1,000 people in here. Go like BK's YouTube page. Go subscribe to it. If you're a Texas fan, you won't find any better coverage of the Longhorns on YouTube than with BK. I just put it in the chat. So go subscribe to BK's YouTube page. Do me a favor. Do me a solid there as well. We greatly appreciate that from everybody. Is there any history with Chip Kelly and D'Amico Ryans? Yes, there is. D'Amico Ryans played for Chip Kelly when he was in Philadelphia. So there is a history there. And Chip Kelly used to refer to D'Amico Ryans as Mufasa, the Lion King. So there is some history, and it feels like some very positive history between those two. Let's do this. Let's open up the lines here. And let me get in here and open up these lines and make sure that I don't have anything blasting or messing up here. And let's put the option for you to get in live on video in the chat. So linked at the top of the chat, I should probably. Okay. Okay, Cody, here we go. All right. Get in live here. Get in live here. All right, so you get in live, be on video. That's my preference, but if you want to just be audio, you certainly can do that as well. Make sure I got my head for when people jump in here. Good. Okay, so you want to jump in at the top, you certainly can. Super chats will go to the front of the line as well. We get Big Steve. No, I see you. You'll be next. Big Steve says, please, not more Shanahan system. That certainly is a concern. If you just stick with the Shanahan style of offense. And it feels like the NFL is starting to figure out how to attack that and best operate against that. If you do stick with that, there is a little bit of a concern. But I would also tell you the hope is when you're hiring somebody new, they're more inventive and they can put their spin on it. Again, you want to get in live, you can at the top of the chat on YouTube. And of course, the chat conversation as well. You would have to give Klint Kubiak a promotion to assistant head coach since this would be a lateral move. I don't know. Chip Kelly and D'Amico had prior relationship. That is positive. My understanding is Klint Kubiak's a free agent because they got fired the staff in New Orleans. So he can look for a new job and he doesn't have to get any sort of extra title. I mean, then if he does, cool. Throw him the extra title if that's your guy. Noah wants to weigh in. Noah, fire away what you got, man.
Yo, what's up, Cody?
What you got for me?
Just what a day. I mean, I was on my way to work this morning. I was watching the video just released about how the Texans need to make the decision sooner rather than later. Than I get off of work and, they made the decision. And that to me, this really shows that this isn't, a lot of people say same old Texans, but this isn't the same old Texans because the old Texans of old would not have done this, and to me, D'Amico isn't saying we're here to win. And if you're not going to help us win, you're not going to be here, even to like his own best friend and Bobby.
Yeah. I mean, look, friendly relationship, friends and business doesn't always mix, and it's even tougher to make a business decision when it is your friend. And you're right. Gary Kubiak got a ton of chances. Other offensive minds or offensive systems got a ton of chances. Bobby Slowik did not get a ton of chances. He dipped. He's gone.
I mean, yeah, you can make the argument about the offensive line and the injuries, but overall, to me, it was just what did it for me was the not making any adjustments. Not even when Dell, Diggs, and Collins were all on the field, he wasn't scheming them to get open, and the passing game still didn't look great, except for a couple of chunk plays from Nico Collins at the beginning of the year before he got injured.
Exactly. What else you got for us, Noah? Fire away one more.
Yeah, I know you got probably a lot of people waiting in here, but I feel like the decision for the OC needs to be an out-of-house hire. Yeah, I still think you give Gerard Johnson and a couple people the interviews, but I think this new coach needs to be from out-of-house and needs to have experience here to lead CJ in this offense.
I'm with you. You got to you want to keep some of those guys in-house, that's fine. Promoting the offensive coordinator, that doesn't feel like the appropriate move or the correct move. It's worth noting, it's not like some of these guys were fired. So as of now, Bill Lazor, Gerard Johnson, Ben McDaniels, they've still got a job. The O-line coaches, see ya. You're out of here.
And before we go, get the offensive line coach hire right.
Well, okay, I'm glad you brought that up, Noah, because it's something that I forgot to mention about two of my top candidates. Thank you for jumping in, Noah. Good stuff from him. I mentioned to you guys Nick Caley. I also mentioned to you guys Dave Ragone, both LA Rams coaches right now. So Ragone is the quarterback's coach. Caley is the tight ends coach / passing game coordinator. They have what is widely believed amongst experts, and I'm not one, so I got to go read about these guys and watch the offensive lines play and look at the stats and all that kind of stuff. The Rams have what is widely believed to be one of the better offensive line coach prospects as their assistant offensive line coach. His name is Zach Cromer. His dad, Aaron Cromer, was the offensive line coach when the Rams won the Super Bowl. You know who he's the offensive line coach for now? The Buffalo Bills. See how good the Buffalo Bills run the football, transform things, protect Josh Allen? Okay, so Aaron Cromer, Bills offensive line coach, his son is Zach Cromer. Zach Cromer is the assistant offensive line coach for the LA Rams. It's within reason that if you hired one of these Rams guys, Nick Caley, the passing game coordinator, tight ends coach, or Dave Ragone, the quarterback's coach, to be your offensive coordinator, it's within reason to think that they could bring over Zach Cromer as the offensive line coach, a guy who's coached in the NFL for a decade now as an offensive line coach, has been coaching for, I think, 15 or so years total. And, oh, by the way, his dad is the top or one of the top offensive line coaches in all of football. So the Rams connection is certainly a very intriguing one, is certainly a very fun one as well. And I'm glad Noah brought that up from an O-line coach perspective, is if you hire one of the Rams guys, you might be able to steal one of the top offensive line coach candidates from the Rams, as he's the assistant O-line coach, and being the O-line coach in Houston would be a promotion, and you don't have to worry about any sort of blockage, can't make the move, stuff like that. So if you want to get in live like Noah did, you can at the top of the chat. If you want to get in on just the chat, you certainly can. Super chats will jump to the front of the line. I'll try to get to as many as I can. Someone give me a recap. Bobby Slowik got fired, and there's a ton of offensive coordinator names the Texans could go out there and get. Glorious day for the Texans offense. Anyone is an upgrade over Bobby's vanilla play and play calling. Look, Bobby Slowik's predictability became a big issue. It felt like defenses didn't have to go and scheme up something to counteract what Bobby Slowik was bringing to the table. And I'm no offensive genius. I might play one on YouTube. I'm no offensive genius, but when I know, yep, this guy's on the field, that guy's on the field in this spot and that spot, they're going to run the football. If I know it, defensive minds across the NFL know it. The predictability from Bobby Slowik was one of the biggest issues. Somebody earlier asked for 3 words: uninventive, predictability, and disappointment from Bobby Slowik's season in 2024. And that ultimately is what led to his firing as the offensive coordinator of the Houston Texans. David with a super chat says, if you bring in Chip Kelly, would he be more balanced run pass or focus more on air raid with CJ? Also, should the Texans be more run focused? I felt like Bobby Slowik got away from the run game a couple times over the course of the season, trying to get the pass game going, certainly at the beginning of the year, but then you had Mixon missing basically after week 2 for a few weeks. So I understand throwing the ball a lot. But once you had everybody, I always felt like there was just a little bit of like herky-jerkiness to the offense, trying to get the passing attack going and you know, not taking care of the rushing attack. And David, run pass balance. I mean, look, you do what works. You know, I think Chip Kelly would do some really impressive things, but I also don't believe Chip Kelly's leaving. Couple of guys, Don from New Jersey, we'll get to you in a second. P. Nasty jumped in here. You were out. Now you're back in, baby. What you got?
I'm back in, man. Can you hear me okay?
I got you, man. Fire away.
Awesome. Yeah, man. I'm, man, it's crazy how the NFL is, guys. Like, it was just 12 months ago. Like, Bobby Slowik was head coach candidate, and we're throwing money bags at him to stay around. And, you know, how quick have the mighty have fallen. And I'm glad we made the move, Cody. I think most of us in here are glad we made the move. You know, hindsight's 2020. We can't look back. I guess if I went down that street, I wish we'd have done it around week 7, week 8, you know, before that bye week or something. I did like the way we played in Kansas City. I really did. I think the refs had something to do it. We didn't have the offensive firepower that we needed to. And I like how D'Amico said, like, I was brought to this city to take us to places we haven't been, and that's to the AFC Championship. And I think in the spirit of that, he had some humility, looked himself in the mirror and said, hey, like, what do I need to do for this city? And executed that. So I'm proud that we did it. It was very forward thinking. And, you know, honestly, unless it sucks, because I think if we had some better offensive linemen, not necessarily talented, you know, I don't know what we're going to get from Tunsil and Howard. I don't know if they've got that swarm we're looking for. So I am concerned about bringing in a new line. I'm concerned about running an install in training camp, because I don't know what we're doing at training camp. We can't get these guys suited up. And it seems like the preseason, they're just trying to feel it out. And here comes, like, the first 4 games of the season are where we're getting our training camp at. But, you know, if nothing changes, nothing changes. So I'm excited for it. I'm all in, Cody. I'm back in for your coverage of the draft, man. I'm all in. I love you guys. Let's go Texans. Next year, I'm gonna go ahead and buy our Super Bowl tickets, you know, right now. I'm gonna go ahead and buy it, man. So
all right, I love
it. We're this close, guys. We had some bad luck this year. And yeah, like if we can get the install in, if we can get the guys on the same page, and honestly, I think Slowik would be here if we had buy-in from Tunsil. Like if Tunsil bought in and earned that C on his chest, like if he earned it and he lived it every single practice, and I mean you're there at practice, but
Yeah.
I think if we didn't get the contract to Shaq Mason, hindsight's 2020, but I think if he had a little bit better of O-line play and he wasn't so scared and he kind of let his hair down. Oh, one last thing. Whoever we get at OC, was Stroud ever allowed to audible? Like, I don't know if he ran one audible this season.
That'll be a big question for the new OC is what freedom does the quarterback have at the line of scrimmage?
Yeah, and that's like CJ Smart. Like to hell with all that S2 stuff, man. Like I'm sitting there looking games on Sunday, and it's like, man, that's 8 people in the box. Please don't run the ball. Please don't. Like please don't. No, they sure run it. So I think we're off to the right foot here.
Yep.
I think we're off to the right foot. Let's go Texans. Let's go Stoots.
Appreciate you, P Nasty.
Yeah.
Thanks, man. Good stuff from P Nasty. Dom from Jersey. Not the only Jersey Texans fan, but the first one I ever met. What's up, Big Dog?
Stoots, I still have my concerns, but I feel so much better about the way this
hold on. On a day of celebration, we're talking about concerns. What are we worried about here?
Well, you know what it is? I went to a state of depression after the game Saturday, so I just decided to talk no Texans. So all those feelings are still fresh. I'm just beyond frustrated with certain things. The O-line, like the guy before me just said, we don't have those guys, those dogs with that swarm mentality. So no matter what, I feel like we don't have guys who want to get to the second level. We don't have a guy who's going to look at the defenseman in front of him and say, I'm going to whoop your ass on this play. Like we just don't have that, So that's always going to be concerned. The special teams, Fairbairn, you know how I feel about him. But let's get back to Slowik. This was handled beautifully by D'Amico, and honestly, I feel 10 times better about D'Amico. I never felt bad about him, but I feel more confident in him as the leader of this franchise because he sat there and said, we're no longer going to accept mediocrity. We're not going to, I'm not here to hang out with my boys because we all know Slowik and him are friends. That's why he came here probably, but he gave him 2 years. As far as changing him in the middle of the season, I trust D'Amico enough. Obviously, everybody's clamoring over Gerard Johnson, but I mean, you could probably speak on that. Maybe D'Amico wasn't confident in pulling the trigger on that. We all saw it, and as fans, it was extremely frustrating. I listen to you and Landry all the time. It felt like we were seeing things that the coaching staff wasn't, and it felt like week in and week out, D'Amico was sort of like holding his breath, saying, this is the week Bobby figures it out. Same with us. This is the week CJ goes off, and it just never happened. So this is huge. I think it was handled beautifully, and I trust D'Amico that they have somebody in mind. So I don't think they lost out on anybody.
Well, I mean, then go to the guy they interviewed that they didn't get the last time they interviewed for offensive coordinators. Then go to Nick Caley.
I hear the Jets are hot on him though. That's what they're talking about up here.
Okay, you want to go coordinate 75-year-old Aaron Rodgers, or you want to coordinate for C.J. Stroud? You want Aaron Glenn to be your head coach? You want D'Amico Ryans to be your head? You want to go against Buffalo every year, or you want to go against the Jaguars and the Colts and the Tennessee Titans?
Totally get it.
Plus, who's got big money? I mean, right. Cal McNair will write checks, baby.
And I want to say that this is a message to Texans fans. Don't ever doubt our ownership because no matter what, even during the bad times, this team has always been willing to spend. So that's one thing we can never count out Cal. So if D'Amico goes to Cal and says, I want XYZ, chances are he's going to get him. My question to you, because you're obviously at practice a lot, you go to training camp. What changed? Obviously, I know the play on the field that we all saw. What changed about your excitement about Bobby? Because I remember even Landry last year was excited. I was excited about him. The offense looked different. It seemed in sync. What the hell happened?
I feel like he went to – it felt to me like they went to calculus before they really had mastered algebra. That's what it felt like to me. Like they went to high-level stuff before the basics were in there. I do feel like once they added Stefon Diggs and they had a healthy Tank Dell, they maybe were too focused on 3 wide receiver situations, trying to throw the ball, trying to get the ball to everybody, not being – I mean, remember how many times we would bang our head against the wall God, they're running the ball so much with Dameon Pierce. God, they're running the ball so much with Devin Singletary. It worked a little bit more with Singletary than it did with Pierce.
Yeah.
But we were banging our head on first downs this year, not like they had some success running the ball. They made things easier for the passing attack. And I just feel like a lot of the stuff they called and created, it looked like it was well designed and put together. And I think the league caught up to him very fast, and he didn't have a pivot. I mean, some of these opening drives were pretty decent, and coming out of halftime against the Chiefs, that's an excellent drive. He scripted that well. I had that ready, and I'm sure scripted a couple of plays and then called it on the fly. But too many defensive coordinators can spend too much time adjusting to what you do, and then you just watch some of the stuff, guys running into the same area. The big thing for me, the damning quote coming out of Saturday after the Chiefs game was CJ Stroud said, "I didn't have answers to some of the things that Kansas City did."
Yes.
And that's up to the offensive coordinator to build in answers. If the quarterback doesn't see it, that's the quarterback's fault. But if there's no answers, that's a problem for how you create the whole thing.
Correct. And a few things on CJ Stroud, because you mentioned something, it was either last night or the night before on SNL. Let's all be honest here. There's the slightest doubt in our mind about CJ making, we want to make sure that we want to make him the highest paid quarterback one day, because eventually it's the market. You got to do it. So I want to see him in a different scheme. I don't think he flourishes in this scheme. So as much as CJ the other day said, like, he stands with Bobby, he supports him, he wants him here, I think CJ is very good at being a professional and not putting guys on blast like that. But I think deep down, CJ knows he needs something different here. And to go back to your point, Cody, there's been times where I'm looking at CJ, he kind of looks lost out there on the field. Like, either he's trying to do too much and no one's helping him. I've seen D'Amico try and calm Slowik down on some of the Texans YouTube stuff. Just get him loose before a game. Let's have some fun. So it seemed like it was very tense on the offensive side of the ball. But either way, I do have to run. But I'm just thrilled about this. Makes the Texans offseason so much more exciting now. And I hope we get our guy from the Rams, Cody. Good talking to you, brother.
Dom from Jersey weighing in. Good stuff from him. Appreciate him jumping in. You want to jump in like Dom? You want to jump in like P Nasty? You can. Top of the chat. You want to get in the super chats? You certainly can. You'll jump to the front of the chat line with that. Reed Dresden says, if we all pray hard enough, we get Chip Kelly and Jeff Stoutland. Time to manifest the change. So Jeff Stoutland is the offensive line coach for the Philadelphia Eagles. Stoutland was a Chip Kelly guy back in the day, I believe. I believe he ended up there in Philadelphia initially because of Chip Kelly. So I don't know exactly how that works out. I don't know if you can, give him a different title so that he can leave in Philadelphia. I don't know if the Eagles would just let him go. And again, I don't believe Chip Kelly is going to depart Ohio State and the juggernaut that it is right now to go be the Texans offensive coordinator. Lane McCall says, year one, CJ Stroud converted so many third and longs, made Slowik look good, didn't improve in year two with different issues. Good move. Let's go. Yeah, you're right. Okay. The time, and you got to find out about CJ Stroud too. That's an important element of this conversation as well, because it feels like the ceiling for CJ Stroud is a little bit further away than it was a year ago. So you need to find out as much as you can about CJ Stroud in year three and get him the opportunity and have the opportunity for him to develop, improve, maximize, and then find out exactly how much money he's worth at the end of year three, when you can then start to sign him to a contract extension. But Lane, your points are right. Sometimes CJ made Bobby look good. Sometimes this year when the offense looked good, it was CJ making things look good. Halston Keller with the super chat. Hire both Josh Case suits up Josh QB coach. And yeah, you want to get Case in there in the coaching staff. You want to get Josh McCown in there. I'm shooting for a young guy. I want to be the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, where every year the offensive coordinator is going and being a head coach somewhere, because that means you kicked ass on offense. Okay, it's a big thing of UH back in the day. They didn't want to be a stepping stone program. They didn't want coaches leaving UH go coach other programs in college. That means you're kicking ass every year. If you're hiring a new offensive coordinator every 1 or 2 years, either stuff's going horribly wrong or stuff's going great. and you're finding yourself with an opportunity to constantly be in the mix. I mean, if they had a slightly above average offense, they're playing the Buffalo Bills this week. They're playing for a chance to go to the Super Bowl. We're not talking about firing the offensive coordinator and hiring somebody new. I want young, I want exciting, I want inventive, and I want a guy that in a year or two, some other team's introducing at a press conference and letting them know, hey, by the way, this guy was the offensive coordinator in Houston. He was awesome, and he's our head coach now. That's what I want. That's what I want. I want somebody that everybody's going to try to come steal after 1 year because he performed so well for the Houston Texans. That's what I want. Well, Andre Johnson for coaching job. Dre had a little bit of that, and I don't think he was in love with it. Dan Orlovsky, keep him as far away from Houston as possible. Draft a guard, sign a veteran center, or sign a veteran center, sign a veteran guard, and draft a wide receiver. Slowik will recover. Now let's see our offense work. Yeah, you'll find out. I mean, how much of it was the players this year? How much of it was the coaching this year? I mean, we'll have a better understanding of exactly how good or bad some of these players are next season when you have a new guy calling the offense, when you have somebody else working through it and operating through it. So that is certainly Jack, we lost our assistant defensive line coach to Atlanta. Time for JJ to get into coaching. I don't think so. I don't think so. JJ's got a pretty good gig with CBS and running the soccer team and all that kind of stuff. Preston with a super chat. I want offense spread out with better wide receivers and tight ends. New OC should have Ohio State type system. Look, I don't care what the system is. You've just got to maximize it. And you got to make sure the players that you can't get rid of in 2025 can play in it, and you can maximize them within the system. If you want to stick with the Shanahan system, be my guest. You want to go get the somebody from the Sean McVay tree, be my guest. Like, I think there's a lot. That you can do. You want to try to pry Chip Kelly away? Call him. See if he'll do it. I don't believe he'll do it, but if you want to call Chip Kelly, try it. Try it. Cody, what do you do if CJ says he wants Gerard as offensive coordinator? I tell him he's not the head coach, and that's not his decision to make. I mean, CJ Stroud can have input. He can they can maybe have OCs talk to him, or he can talk to OCs or whatever. Like, CJ Stroud can have input, but CJ Stroud's he's done nothing to warrant decision-making power. Tom Brady tells you he wants something. Patrick Mahomes tells you he wants something. Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, like, you listen, but CJ Stroud is not a shot caller here. You know, they've got to do what's in the best interest of CJ Stroud. I don't believe Gerard Johnson as offensive coordinator is in the best interest of CJ Stroud. So, IDK, Super Bowl next season. From your lips to God's ears. All right, Jeremy wants the top 3 choices. Let's go through the top guys for me, and then I'll go through some other names here as well. My top choice, my number 1 choice, is Nick Caley, the Los Angeles Rams tight ends coach / pass game coordinator. Caley previously coached in New England, where he was the tight ends coach. He then left New England. He interviewed for the Texans offensive coordinator job 2 seasons ago. Didn't get the job. Obviously, went to Bobby Slowik. He went to Sean McVay, coached with McVay in LA for a year. The Patriots offered him up to $3 million to be the offensive coordinator last offseason. He turned them down, stuck around with McVay for an additional year, and has been a guy that has been on a couple of teams' radars already as the offensive coordinator. Caley is the top of my list. He is number 1 on the list. Also, with a Rams coach, you could potentially bring their assistant offensive line coach, Zach Cromer, over to be the offensive line coach for the Houston Texans. And there would be some synchronization there amongst the offensive minds if they were able to bring over the assistant line coach in LA. My number 2 on the list is Dave Ragone, the Los Angeles Rams quarterback coach. Ragone has a lengthy coaching history. He coached initially for Sean McVay in Washington. Then he was in Chicago with John Fox. Fox got fired. One of the only coaches that got retained on the staff when Matt Nagy came in was Dave Ragone. Ragone was thought highly of by Nagy. He left Chicago. So now you got McVay experience. You got Andy Reid style experience under Nagy. It's not exactly Andy Reid experience, but that type of style. And then he goes to Atlanta, where he is the offensive coordinator for Arthur Smith. Arthur Smith is teach tape when it comes to zone rushing. He's the guy that when you want to bring in that type of offense, when you want to maximize it, Arthur Smith is one of the best to do it. And Ragone was the offensive coordinator under him. Now, Ragone didn't call plays. Caley hasn't called plays either. But my thought process with McVay guys is Kevin O'Connell didn't call plays. He's fantastic for Minnesota. Zach Taylor didn't call plays. He's been fantastic for the Cincinnati Bengals. So Ragone, also Rams coach. Potentially you could bring over Zach Cromer, the assistant offensive line coach for the LA Rams, and you could make him your offensive line coach in Houston. And then you have synchronization throughout the offense. Ragone is also really good friends with McVay, and McVay goes out of his way to talk about how good Ragone is. So I have nothing but I have no reason to doubt Sean McVay because he doesn't want to lose coaches. He doesn't want to lose He doesn't want to lose coaches. He doesn't want to lose guys off his staff, have the brain drain happen. Number 3 on my list, Josh McCown. The upward mobility of McCown and the fact that people have talked about him being an offensive mind in the league for about a decade now, it's intriguing. Nick Caserio obviously knows him, having almost made him the head coach of the organization twice. McCown's coaching experience is pretty limited. He was a quarterback's coach for the Carolina Panthers last year. He got fired midseason when they fired Frank Reich. And then he was the quarterback's coach this past year for Kevin O'Connell in Minnesota. So Frank Reich's offense, Kevin O'Connell's offense, 2 different offenses with some experience, plus all the offenses he learned and helped install when he was the backup quarterback with various other quarterbacks playing in front of him when he was a quarterback in the league for nearly 2 decades. So McCown's experience traditionally a little bit lighter, with extra, different experience, a little bit longer than some of these other candidates. Here's what I like about McCown. McCown was brought into a quarterback room that had a reclamation project and a rookie. Kevin O'Connell trusted Josh McCown to come in and work with a reclamation project and a rookie. Obviously, the rookie, he got erased from the equation because of the injury. Well, the Sam Darnold reclamation project was fantastic. It went really well for the Minnesota Vikings for most of the season. McCown deserves some credit for that. Not all of it. Obviously, Kevin O'Connell's the top offensive mind, but McCown deserves some credit for that. T. Martin is number 4 on my list. He's the Baltimore Ravens quarterbacks coach. He previously was the offensive coordinator at USC. He called plays as the OC when there was an offensive minded head coach there. So the head coach trusted him to call plays, even though the head coach could have done it. Now, Martin did lose his play calling responsibilities. He's bounced around for a few years as a coach. Previously was the wide receivers coach for the Ravens. Todd Monken came in to run the new offense for the Baltimore Ravens, and T. Martin found himself moved to quarterbacks coach. Lamar Jackson has now won 2 straight MVPs with T. Martin as his quarterback coach. Now, obviously, that's not everything. That's not all T. Martin, but it certainly is something. I've got a name now as my 5th on the list here that is pretty intriguing to me. And give me a moment while I set it up here and put it in. But you'd be stealing from an offense that was fantastic this year, and you'd maybe be weakening an organization by doing it. 5th on my list is Tanner Ingstrands. He is as you see on the screen, the Detroit Lions passing game coordinator. He has been in Detroit since 2020. Previously to that, he was a quarterback at San Diego State. He then coached at San Diego for over a decade, where he was also the offensive coordinator. He's been sitting under the Ben Johnson tree for the past few seasons. And while he's not Ben Johnson, you would think somebody from his staff could maybe be the next Ben Johnson. So Ingstrands is an interesting name. He's obviously a candidate to be on Ben Johnson's staff in Chicago. He's a candidate to replace Ben Johnson in Detroit. Might be a harder one to pry away, but certainly Ingstrands is a guy that I would be interested in. Another name that I'm fairly interested in, and this one's a little bit more outside the box. This one's a little bit more harder to see how it works, and did you want to make the move there for this guy? But the next name that I would bring up is a guy named Will Stein. Stein is the Oregon offensive coordinator. He was excellent at UTSA. Prior to being at UTSA, he was a high school football coach. Okay? He was excellent at UTSA. He gets snatched up by Dan Lanning, brought to Oregon. They're amazing for a couple of seasons with him as the offensive coordinator. And in fact, they were the 14th best offense when he was at UTSA, and then they were the second best and 13th best offense the past 2 seasons at Oregon. Stein's a young guy. He's a fast riser. He probably is lighter on the experience than most people would like. He talks about his system like the smart guys talk about their systems. He says he runs a system that is pro style, can be translatable for the college kid to the pros. And I think about the success right away that Bo Nix had after previously running Stein's offense. Bo Nix was incredible as a rookie. That's a big positive. That's a more CJ-centric. You'd have to put some really good coaches around Will Stein, but that's a name that you should consider. I would also throw in there, out of Detroit, I would throw in there Hank Fraley. Hank Fraley, and I'll put his name here on the board here in just a second. Hank Fraley is the offensive line coach for the Detroit Lions. Fraley was an undrafted offensive lineman out of Robert Morris, had about a decade of experience in the NFL, bouncing around to a couple of different teams. He then ended up as the assistant offensive line coach for the Detroit Lions in 2018 after coaching in college for most of his coaching career. Promoted to offensive line coach in 2020, Fraley was interviewed reportedly by the Seattle Seahawks for their offensive coordinator job. Now, Fraley, of course, offensive line coach, not a ton of call plays experience, but if the Seattle Seahawks, who have a defensive-minded head coach and desperately need an improvement with their offense, if the Seahawks trusted Fraley, it's worth checking out. Plus, you'd hope that a hard ass like Hank Fraley would be able to come here and take the offensive linemen that had a little bit of laissez-faire attitude and maximize those guys and maximize what they can bring to the table from a blocking standpoint. So Hank Fraley, he's behind Will Stein on my list, but I think it'd be an interesting conversation. Other names to think about, I do not believe Chip Kelly would leave Ohio State, but it's worth talking to Chip Kelly to see if he'd be interested. He'd be one of the most experienced names that you could go out there and get. He's obviously called plays before. He has a relationship with DeMeco Ryans from when he was DeMeco Ryans' head coach in Philadelphia. But I don't believe Chip Kelly would leave. Klint Kubiak, if you want to stick with the Shanahan system, how about when he was running the Kubiak system? He worked for his dad with Denver. He obviously had some success in Minnesota where he was the quarterback's coach and then called the plays as the offensive coordinator for the Vikings. He was with San Francisco last year. He was the New Orleans Saints offensive coordinator this year. The Saints scored like 100 points the first 2 weeks. They looked awesome. Then everything fell apart in New Orleans. I don't think that was Kubiak's fault. I'm sure that was a lot of the staff, or excuse me, the players in New Orleans just not being anywhere near as good as those first 2 weeks. But if you want to stick with the Shanahan system, this would be the Shanahan system guy that I'd go out there and get. But I don't think you should hire based on who's in what system. Some other names that I would think about that I'd throw in there just for you to consider. I'm not going to put them on the screen. Brian Johnson, he's the Washington Commanders offensive pass game coordinator. He's the former OC for the Eagles. He was a disaster for the Eagles, got fired after 1 year, but hey, maybe he's learned from his disaster. And oh, by the way, it looks like the pass game for the Commanders is working pretty good. And if Cliff Kingsbury trusts you to help with his offense, you might be pretty darn good. Obviously, former head coaches are intriguing names. I'm not super excited about Doug Peterson, but he's out there. I don't believe Mike McCarthy, former Cowboys head coach, would take an offensive coordinator job. He didn't take one when he got fired in Green Bay. He hasn't been a coordinator since, I think, 2006. Frank Reich, he was such a disaster in Carolina. That's a little off-putting to me. And then let's go to some less experienced names that we're just kind of taking some flyers on. Joe Blaymeyer is the Kansas City Chiefs pass game coordinator. He's been in Kansas City for about a decade now. Andy Reid specifically mentions Blaymeyer is the guy that steals plays from other teams and creates them in the Kansas City offense and helps them run it. He's credited with creating the play that they ran in the Super Bowl when they won their first Super Bowl. Josh Grizzard is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers pass game coordinator. He was with Liam Cohen. He graduated from Yale. He worked in Miami previous to being in Tampa. Jalen Waddle talks a lot about how Grizzard helped him become an impressive rookie right away in the league. Obviously, he's a candidate for Cohen's staff. He's a candidate for Cohen's job in Tampa, but that's an intriguing name that I would think about. Again, the lightly experienced names here. Brian Fleury, who's the San Fran 49ers tight ends coach. Jake Peetz, who's the Seattle Seahawks pass game coordinator. I'd be a little iffy on him. He's not even getting consideration to necessarily be the OC after he was there last year. And then here's an experienced name that you probably haven't heard elsewhere, Darrell Bevell. Darrell Bevell was the offensive coordinator for the Seattle Seahawks when they won the Super Bowl. Now, he's also the offensive coordinator that decided to pass the ball in the Super Bowl and not hand the ball to Marshawn Lynch. That'll always stick with him. He's had some stints in Detroit and Jacksonville where things didn't go well, but he was the interim head coach when things went sideways. He's been rehabbing himself in Miami for a couple of seasons here. So experience with an offshoot of the current system, plus some big-time experience, a previous play caller. Darrell Bevell is a more experienced, though less exciting name for the Houston Texans. So those are some of the names there. That's my top list. Let's get to the Super Chats. I appreciate people with the Super Chats. Preston says, I want offense spread out with better wide receivers and tight ends. He said that. I read that one already. He also added, let CJ be his own OC. No, CJ hadn't earned that right. That's not what, CJ hadn't earned that right, so not quite. Okay, would D'Amico hire a mentor in Chip Kelly? If he's the right guy for the job, hire him. I don't care if he was a mentor, an enemy, a friend, I don't care. Luis Salas says the Rams guy seems like the best choice for this one. Yeah. I like Nick Caley. He's my top guy. Cody Stoots is the most obvious offensive line coach hire of all time. I'd be a disaster. And those guys would not listen to me. Those guys would not listen to me. Austin Wick says, get Chip Kelly, then draft Travion Henderson, the running back that he coached at Ohio State. Yeah, certainly some good Ohio State players on offense. Emeka Egbuka, the wide receiver from Ohio State, he'd be an interesting one as well. So, Engineer, he likes the Chip Kelly thing. Chip Kelly be a dream if possible. He's expressed interest in becoming a head coach, could stay around for a while. Disinterest, in being a head coach. Yeah, that's the thing is when you talk about redemption for Chip Kelly, there's no redemption. He's not going to be a head coach in the NFL again. Nobody's going to turn their system and their program over to him again. So there's no redemption for Chip Kelly. We all knew he'd call offense. He comes in, he calls offense for the Texans. Well, that's not redemption. That's not redemption. If Klint Kubiak's considered, do you think D'Amico would consider Gary as an offensive advisor? No, Gary hasn't coached since 2020. Gary's coaching career is done. He likes hanging out on his tractor, mowing his grass. That's, I think, a direct quote that he gave to Landry Locker when Landry had him on the channel back in the day. Danny says, what happened with Chip Kelly? Well, Chip Kelly's he's been a head coach at the NFL level twice. It failed miserably both times in 1 year in San Francisco. He wasn't a great head coach at UCLA. He was fine. And I just don't believe an NFL team's going to give him another shot. So there's no redemption for Chip Kelly. Redemption would be being a head coach and being good at it. There's no redemption for Chip Kelly. I just don't believe he's leaving Ohio State. Again, the situation at Ohio State, you start every year with an inherent advantage that nobody else has in college football, with the exception of probably 10 other teams. He has the best players every single year. Okay. And if he doesn't like a quarterback, he can swap him out. He can change him. and he could be a legend at Ohio State, sticking around there for a while. Now, you want to sell legend? Hey, be one of the only guys to coordinate a college football national championship and then go coordinate a Super Bowl. Go be one of those guys. That's legendary. That'd be impressive. So I just don't believe Chip Kelly's going to leave the Ohio State job. I would certainly try to talk to him and ask him. That's the experienced guy. You want experience? Chip Kelly's the guy that you want. Okay. I don't think experience is a necessary qualifier. All right. I don't believe experience is a necessary qualifier to call offense. I really don't. Yeah, you have some growing pains with the guy here or there. But it doesn't feel like it's a necessary qualifier for me to be the offensive coordinator. Mr. Heisenberg says, like Cody's idea of picking from McVay's coaching tree. Yeah, look, it's the coaching tree to pick from right now. It's the coaching tree to pick from. You think about what Zach Taylor has brought to the table. You think about what Kevin O'Connell has brought to the table. You think about what Matt LaFleur has done. He's a former McVay guy. So it's the staff to pick off of. And it's reloaded itself too. Like they have renewed the talent pool because guys are dying, tripping over themselves to go be McVay's guy. Does Bill O'Brien want to leave BC? I don't give a damn if he does. I wouldn't let Bill O'Brien anywhere near this facility. Judge Dredd, the Texans offer the right money, he would come, and everybody got a price. Hey, look, you want to go $1 million man approach on Chip Kelly? You could certainly find a lot of money and find an opportunity there to try to pry Chip Kelly away. But if a guy's leaving for the money, is that the best reason to leave? Obviously, everybody's going to get paid at some point, but Kelly leaving for the money or Kelly leaving for the opportunity? Kelly leaving to be a legend? Let's see what he's got here. Let's see what he's got. So, okay, I'm going to wrap it up there. Landry Locker still live over in the locker room. You want to get in there? I'm going to go hop in the chat, talk a little bit over there with the folks. Mike's book reviews one more time here at the end. In the end, I just don't want another first-time play caller during this window, but also someone who plays to CJ's strengths and won't make him conform to their system. That's a good one, man. I mean, look, you got to maximize what Houston does have. You got to get Nico Collins, Joe Mixon involved early and often. Do what they can, and then make CJ Stroud comfortable. Do what he does. Maximize what he brings to the table. I'm with you. First-time guys can do that. First-time. Kevin O'Connell was a first-time guy when he went to Minnesota. It's working out okay. Same with Zach Taylor. It's working out okay. There are a little bit of growing pains, but I don't believe the learning curve for calling offense is as deep and long as it used to be. I just don't believe that. Is Mike McDaniel secure in Miami? Yes, he is. Oh, Landry's gone already. No more live locker room. Oh, yeah, he's done. All right, well, I'll stay for a few more minutes then. Q&A time. Fire away. Anything. Offensive coordinator. Let's see. Let me put it in the chat one more time. I got a long list, 3,500 words plus, bunch of different names. If you want to get in there, Houston football, if you like to read it more than you like to watch it. What else everybody got? What's your favorite sushi spot in Houston? There's an all-you-can-eat sushi place around the corner from me called Domoishi. It's temporarily closed. I can't imagine why it's temporarily closed, but great price, good sushi, good food. I like the place over there in Richmond, right before Oishi. I like Oishi. So I'm not a fancy sushi guy. I'm a volume sushi guy. Stoots, why do they say Nick Caley is like the new Ben Johnson? Inventiveness, forward thinking. That's kind of where they like that. Klint Kubiak would be a hire. I agree. If you're saying an A hire, I don't know. I like guys more than Klint Kubiak. He'd be. I mean, if you want to run the Shanahan system, he's the guy. Anyone else we consider from the Shanahan tree? I mean, if you're going Shanahan, go Kubiak. That'd be my thought. You think you get Philly's O-line coach here to Houston? I mean, contracts, timing. Can you get him a promotion so that he gets there? What happened to the food reviews? Hey, we're still doing them. Just haven't done as much of them. We'll do some more in the offseason. Going to the Senior Bowl next week in Mobile, Alabama. There'll be some opportunities for some food reviews there in Alabama. Pho or ramen? I'm more of a ramen guy. I like noodles. I think it's possible the Texans promote someone that is already in the building. Yeah, possible, sure. Is that a good move? Is that the way to go? No, I don't believe that's the case. I don't believe they should promote anybody who's on the offensive staff to be the offensive coordinator. So, I mean, keeping some of those guys in the building, sure, but promoting them to be the OC, no. How long before they hire someone, Cody? I mean, it could be a while. If they get beat out for one of their guys, I mean, they have to go back to the drawing board, but I'd expect interviews to start happening in the next few days, and I would think they want to get an offensive mind in place sooner rather than later, start putting together what they're going to do for this offseason. So I would tell you it wasn't going to take that long. The Oishi lunch special is unbeatable. You're absolute Patrick knows. Patrick knows. The offseason is Cody's food review Super Bowl. We will have plenty. We'll have plenty. Cody, how many subs to get you to grow a beard until preseason game 1 starts? Oh my gosh, I'd have a beard. I'd have a beard over the summer. Can I trim it? Can I trim the beard? If I can trim the beard, I like, so that it doesn't get all like homeless looking. If we get to 11,000 by the draft, we'll put some beard parameters in. Nathan. Why does the Shanahan tree need to be considered? Hasn't this offense been figured out? It's not my top choice by any means. Not my top choice. Mike McCarthy, I don't think he'd take an offensive coordinator job. He hadn't been a coordinator in 20 years. Cedric says, thoughts on Matthew Golden at 25, possibly Emeka Egbuka. I like Egbuka more than I like Golden, but solid. Cody, what about Matthew McConaughey for OC? All right. CJ, why don't you go out there and throw that dang ball, man? Throw that ball, man. Laramie, man, blocking is like space. When you need it, it's there for you. When you don't want it, it's still there for you. Do you think D'Amico watches the Stoots podcast? Probably not. Though I did say don't wait to fire Bobby Slowik last night and this morning, and they didn't wait to fire Bobby Slowik. Judge Dredge wants somebody hungry with something to prove. Nathan says no trimming if you do the beard bet. Yeah. Not fun. You look like Evan Gaddis. Yeah, like fat Evan Gaddis. Your beard looks like two dogs kissing. Does that mean I'm ugly? Byron Leftwich for OC for the Texans. I mean, Byron wasn't even in football last year. Who's the craziest name that you see as a realistic possibility? Craziest name that's a realistic possibility. Craziest name that's a realistic possibility. I mean, Shane Day. Shane Day, the quarterback's coach for the LA Chargers. He was previously in Houston. He was on the offensive staff last year. He leaves, the offense kind of falls apart. I mean, Shane Day wouldn't be the craziest one. I wouldn't I would not enjoy that. I feel like there's a lot of guys who have, some better cases to be made, but Day's coached for a long time and he's had a lot of success with Justin Herbert. So, and he was a part of the success of CJ Stroud last year. So Shane Day would be the crazy one. Eric Bieniemy coached the 25th scoring offense in the NFL in 2023, and then he coached the 126th scoring offense in college this past year at UCLA. Not Eric Bieniemy. So this is interesting. Mo Beasley brings up a good name here. I say good name. So Kevin Wilson was the offensive coordinator at Ohio State when CJ Stroud was the quarterback at Ohio State. So he was the offensive coordinator. Now, he didn't call plays. That was Ryan Day's job. So he didn't call plays. That was Ryan Day's job. He also didn't coach quarterbacks because they had a quarterbacks coach that year. That guy's name is Corey Dennis. Now, Kevin Wilson left Ohio State after being the offensive coordinator, was the head coach at Tulsa, and they sucked for 2 years. And he brought Corey Dennis with him to Tulsa, and they sucked at Tulsa. And it was bad. And now Corey Dennis is at UNLV, and Kevin Wilson's not coaching anywhere. So on the staff somewhere, maybe OC, no thank you. Matt Nagy, I mean, is he technically the OC in KC right now? And Matt Nagy's got to think he's going to be the he's the OC in KC. So lateral move, hard to do, can't make that happen. He's also got to think he's taking over for Andy Reid when the big fella hangs it up too. Is there any way we can get Cliff Kingsbury in the building after the season's over with? I mean, you can trade for him, but that's asinine. You don't want to trade for an offensive coordinator. Doug Peterson, Peterson kind of fell apart there in Jacksonville. Wasn't great the final 2 years. He actually gave up play calling duties to Press Taylor while he was in Jacksonville. So thoughts on picking up DK Metcalf? I wouldn't trade for him, but I'd get him if he ended up getting cut. If you could trade a late pick for him, I'd be in on it. So, okay, that'll do it for me on the live stream here. Thanks for asking the questions. Thanks for the super chats. Thanks for watching. Thanks for the thumbs up. Please go subscribe. If you weren't here earlier, please go subscribe to SNL, which is the channel that I do with Landry Locker. So please go subscribe to SNL. Then we're going to be live at 4:00 today talking about Bobby Slowik. The SNL channel is in the chat right now, 4:00 live, talking Bobby Slowik. Go subscribe to The Locker Room with Landry Locker. He has good stuff over there. Go subscribe to my buddy Brad Kellner's UT page. BK is 2 people away from 1,000. Go over there, subscribe, get BK to 1,000, please. Get BK to 1,000. So that's where we are. If you missed the top 3, top 5, all the other names, just rewind. You'll find it all. And we end the live streams the same way each and every time. This is my hope for you. This is my charge for you as well. I want you to eat good. I want you to sleep good. I want you to be good. And we'll talk Texans again soon, which is 4 p.m. today. Thanks for watching, everybody. And we're off and running on this OC search. Talk to you at 4 on the SNL channel.